Hello there again. My name is Marvin Kilborn. I'm a retired public school teacher. Hopefully you've been following my video series. My intent is to tell my entire story of all the years that I spent as a public school teacher. I spent 15 years in the profession. My last video was about Longview High School in Longview, Texas. I was only there for 1 week. They had basically hired me and then just cheated me out of the job. Before that, I was in Brownsboro. If you watch that video about Brownsboro or Chandler Intermediate School, you'll notice that I was let go. I was given a letter informing me that I was not going to be invited back. I wasn't going to be given a contract to return the next year. So after getting messed over by Longview, I had applied for unemployment. Okay, so I ended up being on unemployment for a year and a half. I continued looking for teaching jobs. I mean, I applied everywhere. I was willing to move. I was willing to relocate if I needed to. Living in Tyler, Texas, I applied in Dallas, again, Fort Worth, Austin, Waco, Houston, San Antonio. I mean, I applied all over the place trying to find a teaching job. And if you watched my last video, I had mentioned that our governor, Rick Perry, had cut the education budget by $5 billion. So it was pretty hard to find a job. Especially, I mean, I'm certified in both social studies and math from grades 4 through 12. So I really shouldn't have had this much trouble finding a job, but I did. Anyway, this video is going to be about Lucyle Collins Middle School in Lake Worth, Texas. In January of 2012, Lake Worth, or Lucyle Collins, the principal from Collins Middle School, called me, asked me if I could come out for an interview. Now, Collins Middle School is about 2.5 hours from my home in Tyler, Texas. So it's a really good haul. But I did. I drove all the way out there. They interviewed me. One of the things they asked me about was if I had any experience with something called C-Scope. C-Scope, now I believe the C stood for curriculum. C-Scope was essentially a canned curriculum that one of the school districts in Texas dreamt up. And it took off. A lot of districts in Texas used it. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say around 65% of districts in the state of Texas were using the C-Scope program, this format, before it finally got killed off because it was so controversial, especially in the area of social studies. But basically, C-Scope was a canned curriculum covering the 4 core subjects of math, social studies, English, and science. And it was essentially, like I said, it's a canned curriculum. Somebody had written everything from what you would teach on what day, lessons, or at least sample lessons were created for all these different subjects, for all the different objectives. Even to the point where there was a script. There was an actual script that teachers were expected to follow with questions you were supposed to ask and sample answers that the students were supposed to give. It was pretty crazy. Actually, it was very intrusive. When you talk about teacher autonomy, teachers are supposed to be allowed to teach the way they want to teach or the way they do teach. We're required to teach certain subjects. We're required to teach these state mandated objectives, but we're given the freedom to teach it the way we want to teach it, the way that we believe is best to teach it. C-Scope circumvented all of that. It basically stole the teacher's autonomy. Now, they asked me if I had any experience with C-Scope. I really didn't. I had only taught in really 2 other schools. I taught in Dallas for a couple years, and I taught in Brownsboro. Never used C-Scope there. So I knew what it was, but I had never used it. And they're trying to explain to me what it was. But my point was, look, I'm a successful math teacher. I've taught math for 3 years. I get great results on those state math tests. And I was interviewing for an 8th grade math position. So I had written lessons to teach 8th grade math. And I basically derived these from my 6th grade and 7th grade lessons because 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math in Texas is all pretty closely related. It's almost the same thing, just slightly higher levels of skills. So, but anyway, I told them, look, if you're going to hire me, I said, I need to be able to teach my way. I mean, I can follow the C-Scope sequencing and but I need to you be able to use my lessons and teach the way I believe is best. They assured me that I would be able to do that. So the interview ended. I went home, and of course, I'm already looking at what I'm going to have to do if they hire me, because again, it's a 2.5 hour drive one way. So it would be a 5 hour round trip, and that would be under the best conditions. And I'm talking about Dallas and Fort Worth traffic. So to be able to to think that it's actually going to just be a 5 hour round trip would have been really wishful thinking. So I knew that if they hired me that I would have to get a little apartment or something so I could live out there during the week and just come home on weekends. Well, a few days later, they called me back. And again, this is January 2012. So they called me back a few days later, asked me if I could come out there again for a second interview, because this time the principal wanted to meet me. Kathy Harmon was the principal. Suzanne Boyington was the assistant principal who had interviewed me the first time, her and the counselor, and maybe another teacher. I think there was 3 ladies there. Anyway, so they called me and asked me if I could come back because the principal wanted to meet with me. So I said, sure. So there's another 5-6 hour round trip just for another interview, just to try to find a job. So I did, drove all the way out there. Kathy Harmon, who was the principal, she again asked me if I was familiar with C-Scope. We had essentially the same kind of conversation. I said, ma'am, I'm familiar with what it is. I've just never used it. And I said the last time they interviewed me, Miss Boyington assured me that I would be able to teach my way using my lessons. Kathy Harmon also assured me that I would be able to teach my way using my lessons. I just needed to follow the C-Scope sequencing, basically teaching the lessons in a certain order, or the objectives, the skills in a certain order. No problem. I already know that. Every teacher in Texas is supposed to know to do that. You're really just following the state mandated curriculum from the Texas Education Agency website. So anyway, that interview's done. I'm driving home a day or so. I forget if she called me back or if she offered me the job right there on the spot. No, she didn't. I remember going home, and then one day, a few days later, I get a call and they offer me the job, and I accept it. I'm just fortunate, glad to have a job after being out of work for a year and a half. And so I accepted the job. She said, welcome to the best school in Texas. And I'll tell you, if you're watching my videos thinking about becoming a teacher, if any school tells you or claims to be they're the best school in your state or the best school in Texas, decline the job. I mean, I already knew that Lake Worth ISD was one of the lowest performing districts in the state. They were an academically unacceptable district, and I've explained before, there's basically 4 ratings. You were either academically acceptable, exemplary, recognized, acceptable, or unacceptable. Texas has gone to a letter grade system now, but back then, back in 2012, around that area, that time, they went by a four rating category system. Lake Worth ISD was academically unacceptable. The high school was academically unacceptable, and Lucyle Collins Middle School was an academically unacceptable school. So for them to claim to be the best school in Texas, it's just disgusting and insulting. It'd be like the Detroit Lions claiming to be the best football team in the NFL. It's just a flat out lie. They've never been the best and probably never will be. But anyway, Lucille Collins, I already knew. But anyway, so I accept the job. I had asked Ms. Harmon, please make sure you have a contract ready for me to sign, because I'm actually going to get a little efficiency apartment in Fort Worth, just a few miles from the school, because I'm going to live there during the week and just come home on the weekends. Now, not that it's that important where I was staying, but I was trying to save money. So I found this little efficiency apartment in this really, I mean, it was a pretty horrible area of Fort Worth. Thank God my wife never actually came out there and saw where I was living. She would not have been happy, and she probably would have not been able to sleep at night knowing where I was at night. It was a rotten area. It was ghetto. Crack houses. I mean, it was a rough area, and actually the little efficiency apartment I had, I was only paying $300 a month for it. So that should tell you something. Pretty bad. Actually, when I took the apartment, the lady at the counter just advised me, we really don't have many problems here, but just just avoid that corner. There was like a little corner store just maybe 50 yards away. I said avoid that corner, especially at night. So yeah, pretty rough area. Anyway, so I get the efficiency apartment. I've got my contract. I move in and I go to work. I mean, right off the bat, I started realizing, man, this is a weird place. The teachers all seemed to be just really unhappy. There wasn't an excitement and enthusiasm in that school. The students, I mean, I only thought the kids in Oak Cliff, Holsey Middle School were disrespectful to me. These kids in Collins Middle School in Lake Worth, which is just on the west side of Fort Worth, they were horrible. And I normally don't try to talk bad about the kids. And in all my videos, I say I didn't even quit teaching or retire from teaching because of the kids. Kids are just kids. But Lucille Collins, this was a horrible, horrible place. At least it was then. I don't know if it's gotten any better. The kids were just rowdy and disrespectful and out of control. I mean, it was horrible. I don't know if they did the same thing to me at Lucille Collins as they did to me in Keithville, but I certainly had the worst group of kids, and it was me and one other man. Brian Goins was the other 8th grade math teacher. Anyway, pretty quickly in like that first week, I mean, I had teachers coming up to me wishing me luck, hoping that the kids wouldn't run me off or that the administration wouldn't run me off. They told me that everything has to be approved by Miss Harmon and Miss Boyington. You can't do anything without getting their approval first. They told me, these teachers told me that I was the 4th math teacher to be hired that year. The 4th. Now this was January when I got hired, so we only have a few months left in the school year. But I'm the 4th math teacher. So they'd already went through 3 math teachers in the first semester. Insane. I have no idea what ran other people off, except, you know, when I got experiencing how these kids treated me and the way they talked, the way they acted. I mean, they cussed. They were just horrible. There was a few that were good, but by and large, horrible, horrible student body. And then like that first week, I remember one day this little girl jumped on top of her desk and started dancing around on her desk, claiming that she was giving the boys a table dance. It's this little 8th grade girl giving the boys a table dance. Another day, the bell rang for the next class to come in. These 2 little girls come running in there. They were on their hands and feet, running around, crawling around the classroom, barking and pretending to wag their tails. They were pretending to be dogs. It was just insane. Miss Boyington, the assistant principal, she told me that, yeah, you know, the kids are probably going to give you a hard time. And she told me I wasn't going to be expected to make parent contacts like you normally do. She said, if kids give you trouble, they're disrespectful, whatever, just write them up and I'll take care of it. So I did that on the worst behaved kids. I started writing them up, doing referrals on them and sending the referrals to the office. And what was weird was Boyington or Harmon, they would come get the kid or send somebody from the office to get the kid. And then shortly after that, they would send another kid down to grab 3 other students out of my classroom. What they were doing was verifying that what I was claiming on the referral form that the kid was doing, they were interviewing the other students to make sure that I was telling the truth. Now, I've never had that happen in any other school I've taught in, but that told me right away, wow, no wonder I'm your 4th math teacher. I mean, and no wonder all these teachers are coming up to me talking about, you know, wishing me luck and basically telling me this is a rotten place to work because they weren't trusted. Now, one of the insulting and disgusting things about this, and if you've watched my video on public school administrators, one of the problems here, Kathy Harmon, the principal, her only teaching experience had been as a kindergarten teacher. Kindergarten, that's it. Now, kindergarten teachers, God love them. I guess we need them. But essentially, kindergarten teachers are basically just glorified babysitters. I mean, what are you teaching a kid in kindergarten? How to color, how to count to 5. I mean, make sure they get their nap time. I mean, they're essentially overqualified or highly qualified babysitters as a kindergarten teacher. I mean, think about it. Do you remember going to kindergarten? Do you remember your kindergarten teacher? Do you remember what you were taught in kindergarten? I sure as heck don't. But anyway, that's all Miss Harmon was a kindergarten teacher. She didn't teach a real subject, didn't teach a tested subject, didn't teach a core subject, kindergarten. Boyington, Suzanne Boyington, she had been a music teacher. So now we've got two non-academic certified so-called teachers. One's a kindergarten teacher, one was a music teacher. What the heck do they know about teaching academic subjects, especially at the middle school level? Because these two ladies were elementary teachers. Kindergarten and Miss Boynton taught elementary music. So here they are running a middle school. They had no control over it. I mean, they thought they did. They micromanaged us to death, but they really didn't have much control. One example, one time they had an assembly for all of the 8th grade kids. And again, Lucyle Collins was a middle school, but it was just 7th and 8th grade. So there was a lot of kids in the building, but it was just 7th and 8th grade. And one day, Fort Worth was thinking about, or they were about to stand up some kind of high school. It was like a college credit high school, where if the kids went to this high school, the subjects they took, they would also get college credit. It was a pretty cool deal. But anyway, the people that were going to be running this college level, college prep high school came over to talk to our 8th graders, trying to give a little presentation, question and answer session about, and trying to, drum up some enthusiasm and trying to encourage these kids to think about going to this wonderful new high school that Fort Worth was building. But the kids were so disrespectful, so disruptive, so unruly to these ladies that had come over to try to help them and talk to them. The kids were so disrespectful, so bad, that finally Harmon tells us 8th grade teachers to go ahead and get our kids and take them back to the classroom. She said, we're going to cancel this assembly. The kids aren't behaving right. So teachers, go ahead and, even the principal, with the assistant principal and the counselor and all the teachers there, the kids were still so bad, so disruptive, that they canceled the assembly and had us take all of our kids back to our classrooms. That school, again, it was rotten. I've had a lot of different jobs in my life. I've managed restaurants. I've worked in factories. I've been a salesman. I was in the military for 22 years. I've taught in a lot of different schools. Collins Middle School was by far the most horrible, most horrible job I've ever had in my life. I can't say one single thing good about the place. Again, the teachers were miserable. The kids were rotten. The administration was not only absolutely unqualified to be running a school, it sucked. Now, I was teaching my way, okay? Harmon and Boynton had both assured me that even though the school uses C-scope, that I would be allowed to teach my way using my lessons. So I'm showing up and I'm having fun. Actually, the kids were engaged. They were enjoying my lessons. I had other teachers come and tell me that, hey, we just want to let you know the kids love you. They love your class. They love learning. They know that you care that they learn. So it was going great. And then I'd only been there a couple of weeks, and Miss Harmon called me into her office. She had never been to my room yet. Boynton hadn't been to my room either, other than to just look into the door. But Harmon calls me to her office and says, Mr. Kilburn, it's been brought to my attention that you're not using C-scope. You're just teaching your own way. I said, well, ma'am, you and Miss Boynton both assured me that I would be allowed to teach my way using my lessons. I know what I'm doing. I'm a certified middle school and high school math teacher. I know what I'm doing. She goes, well, no, Mr. Kilborn, we use C-scope here in Lake Worth. We use C-scope to the letter, script and all. You're expected to follow the C-scope. I said, well, that's not what y'all told me. She goes, well, that's what you need to do. We use it. And make sure you memorize the scripts. Of course, I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. God darn it, dang it. I'm not an actor, but they want me to follow a script. I guarantee you, for what teachers are paid, there ain't no way in hell that we should be expected to follow some kind of script like we're some kind of actor. Either that or pay us a heck of a lot more money than we're getting paid. Well, I already decided I'm not going to do this. So I went home to my apartment, and I went ahead and wrote up a letter of resignation. I was going to finish out the school year. I was certainly going to abide by my contract and finish the school year. And hey, it is a paycheck. So I was going to continue to teach my way, but I turned in my letter of resignation to Miss Harmon the very next day, just letting her know that I would finish out the school year, but I would not be returning the next year. They probably wouldn't have invited me back the next year anyway. And, with the drive I was making and all that, no, anyway. So I turned into my letter of resignation and went back to class and just kept teaching my way, using my lessons. Now, they would send people in. They had other counselors and teachers and stuff that would come in and observe me and critique me, and they wanted to criticize what I was doing. I mean, it really sucked. Let me see, another thing about Collins. Again, it was a horrible place. One time, I'd only been there, I don't know, maybe a month, because I was only there for about 3 months anyway. I was there from January to April. And they had a drug ring in the school. These 7th, 8th grade kids were bringing or selling drugs in the school. They gathered up, the cops got involved. It was basically a group of 30 kids that were selling drugs in Lucille Collins Middle School. Now, the only thing they did to these kids was they sent them over to the alternative education program for 30 days, and that was it, and then they all came back. But a drug ring. Another time, one of the little girls that was in school suspension, the man that ran that had allowed this little girl to go to the bathroom, and he thought that she'd been gone longer than she really needed to be gone for. So he sent another girl down to the bathroom to check on this little girl. This poor little girl tried to hang herself. She actually had a noose around her neck and was kind of laying on the floor. She tried to hang herself in the girl's bathroom. Now, that was a new one. I never had that happen in any other school that I'm aware of. I mean, Halsey, we had the 2 8th grade boys that raped the 6th grade girl, but the little girl tried to hang herself. I mean, again, this was a rotten, horrible place. One day, I was walking down the hall going towards my classroom, and I noticed these 2 male teachers talking and laughing and carrying on. Turns out they were standing in the middle of the hallway watching porn videos on their cell phones and making comments about these women and what was going on, watching porn. Well, I'm not really a tattletale, but I did go to Miss Harmon and said, hey, man, you may want to be aware that a couple of your male teachers down here watching pornographic videos on their phones. And Miss Harmon, she just told me to mind my own business and get out of her office. I mean, this was after I'd already turned in my letter of resignation, but I still was pretty disgusted with that. Dang, lady, you got your teachers in a middle school. These are 7th and 8th grade little girls, and you got a couple of your male, full-grown men teachers watching pornos. I don't really think I want these men around the little girls. So let me see what else happened there. I ended up again teaching my way, and I took it all the way up to. One of the things Miss Harmon told me when she brought me in and said, "It's been brought to my attention that you're not using C-scope," and she said, the way you're teaching isn't going to help these kids be successful on the 8th grade math STAR test. Now, that was truly insulting to me. I didn't get disrespectful with her. But the point is, this is a kindergarten teacher, a lady that's never taught an actual academic subject, certainly not math. She's only certified in kindergarten. And she's trying to tell me, a fully certified math teacher, that the way I'm teaching math isn't going to help the kids on the test. One of the stupid things about that comment was this test was going to be called the STAR test. The state had been using a test called TAKS, Texas Assessment of Knowledge and Skills. And they had upgraded it or changed it. They do this about every 6-7 years. Changed it to something called STAR, the State of Texas Assessments of Academic Readiness. Now, nobody really knew. We had no idea. We didn't know what this new test was going to look like. The state kept saying it was going to be a lot harder than the TAKS test was, but we didn't have any of it. I don't even think we had any sample questions yet. But so nobody really knew what was going to be on the test or how hard it was going to be. We were just being told it was going to be a lot more demanding, more challenging. So for Harmon, who is not only not a certified math teacher, she was only kindergarten, and also nobody even knew what was going to be on the test. So she was in no position to tell me that the way I was teaching wasn't going to help them anyway. What's really funny is I was there all the way up. I taught them my way They took the test. The very next day after the test, Harmon called me in and gave me a letter placing me on administrative leave for the rest of the school year. Now, I wasn't upset. I wasn't disappointed in that. I actually kind of saw it coming. I just had this feeling that they were going to do something like this to me. I'd already actually packed up my room, took all my posters and everything off my walls. I was all packed, put everything in my car. That same day, it was weird, she called me in and gave me a letter of reprimand, putting me on administrative leave with pay to finish out the school year. I was actually really happy about it. I called Marilyn, my wife, and said, "Hey, honey, I'm coming home. They just put me on administrative leave to finish out the year." She goes, "Good for you. Come on home." So I went to the apartment, packed up, and went home. What was funny is, again, I've said that school was an academically unacceptable school, had really, really low test scores. So here I am teaching my own way. And when the test scores came in, and I could check these online, I brought that middle school, I brought the eighth grade math scores that I brought, that my students got, were way, way higher than any scores they'd ever gotten before under the old testing system. And they were also higher than the other eighth grade math teacher, Brian Goins, who was just a miserable, miserable son of a gun. But they were higher than his too. So anyway, so don't let me do my job my way, but I bring you the best scores you've ever had. I don't know if they ended up getting a better academic rating that year or not. I don't know. But anyway, that's my story about Lucyle Collins Middle School in Lake Worth. And I actually got to where I was calling it Lake Worthless because it was such a horrible place. Lake Worth was Lake Worthless. Anyway, that's my story about Lucyle Collins Middle School in Lake Worth ISD, or Lake Worthless ISD. Just about done telling my story. My next video will be about school in Henderson, Texas. Henderson High School. I was there for 2 years. After that, I'll talk about my experiences at Arp High School in a little town of Arp, Texas. And I'll finish off, probably take me 2 or 3 videos to tell my story about my last school district, Tatum ISD, Tatum High School with Tatum ISD. It'll probably take me 2 or 3 videos to tell that little story and ultimately explain what led up to me deciding to retire earlier than I thought I would as a teacher. But anyway, I'm enjoying still doing these videos. And appreciate anybody that's watching them. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.